Listen to me. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when things feel easier or more convenient. Right now. Because right now is the only moment you actually have. And if you're hearing this, if you're still here, something inside you already knows that the way you've been living can't continue like this. Before we go any further, subscribe to this channel. Not out of habit. Not out of pressure. But because this channel is for people who are done lying to themselves. People who are tired of motivation that fades and change that never lasts. If you're here, it's because a part of you is ready to wake up. Now listen closely. If you're still living the same life, making the same excuses, repeating the same promises to yourself over and over again, then something inside you has to end. Not your hope. Not your dreams. Not your belief in a better future. Something else. The version of you that keeps sabotaging everything you want. You know exactly which version that is. It's the one that says, I'll start tomorrow, and somehow always finds a reason why tomorrow never comes. The one that convinces you that now isn't the right time. That you're too tired, too busy, too stressed, or too far behind. The one that makes big promises late at night and forgets them the next morning. That version of you has been in control for a long time. And it hasn't ruined your life in one dramatic moment. It hasn't destroyed you all at once. It's done something much quieter, much more dangerous. It's kept you comfortable. Let's be clear about one thing before we go any deeper. This is not about hurting yourself. This is not about hate. This is not about destruction. This is about awareness. This is about ending the version of you that keeps choosing comfort over growth, fear over effort, and excuses over responsibility. The weak self isn't who you are. It's who you've been tolerating. It's the part of you that understands your potential perfectly but is terrified of what it would mean to actually live up to it. It knows how much you could become, and that scares it. Because growth demands discomfort. And discomfort demands change. So instead it whispers. It whispers in a calm, reasonable voice. It sounds like logic. It sounds like self-care. It sounds like patience. It tells you that you've already been through enough. That you deserve rest. That you'll do better when things calm down. When life gives you a break. When conditions are perfect. And the dangerous thing is, it doesn't sound like weakness at all. It sounds like you. It knows your story. It knows your past failures. It knows where you got hurt. It knows where you lost confidence. So it uses that information to protect itself. Every time you think about pushing harder, it reminds you of the last time you tried and fell short. Every time you think about changing your habits, it brings up how tired you are. Every time you feel a spark of discipline, it tells you not to be too hard on yourself. And for a while you believed it. You believed that waiting was wisdom. You believed that motivation would return on its own. You believed that somehow things would change without you having to change. But deep down, something has been building. A quiet frustration you don't always talk about. A feeling you try to distract yourself from. A sense that time is moving faster than you expected, and you're still standing in the same place. You see other people moving forward. You see others changing their lives, building strength, discipline, confidence. And part of you feels inspired, but another part feels uncomfortable. Because inspiration reminds you of what you're not doing. And that discomfort doesn't come from jealousy. It comes from self-awareness. You know you're capable of more. You feel it when you're alone. When the noise stops. When the distractions fade. When there's nothing left to blame except your own choices. That's when the truth becomes loud. You don't hate yourself. You're disappointed. Not because you're weak, but because you've been settling. Settling for habits that don't serve you. Settling for routines that drain you. Settling for a version of yourself that you don't respect. And that disappointment hurts more than failure ever could. Because failure means you tried. Settling means you didn't. This is your wake-up call. Not the kind that makes you feel good for 10 minutes and then disappears. Not the kind that gives you energy without direction. This is the kind that forces you to look at yourself honestly. No one is coming to save you. No perfect moment is on the way. No magical surge of motivation is going to appear. No one is going to grab your hand and pull you into the life you want. And that's not depressing. That's freedom. Because it means the power has always been yours. It means that the only thing standing between you and change is the version of you that keeps choosing to stay the same. The weak self doesn't survive on failure. It survives on delay. It doesn't ask you to quit forever. It just asks you to quit today. It tells you one missed workout won't matter. One bad decision won't hurt. One more excuse won't change anything. But it does. Because every time you choose comfort over discipline, you reinforce an identity. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you teach your brain that your words don't matter. And over time, self-trust disappears. You stop believing yourself when you say you'll change. You stop taking your own goals seriously. You stop expecting more from yourself. That's the real damage. Not lack of talent. Not lack of intelligence. But lack of self-trust. And the only way to rebuild that trust is through action. Not tomorrow. Not gradually. No. This doesn't mean you suddenly become perfect. It doesn't mean you never feel tired, afraid, or unsure again. It means those feelings no longer control your decisions. It means you stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What does my future require from me today?" That shift is small, but it's powerful. Because strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's built quietly through uncomfortable mornings, disciplined choices, and moments when you act even when you don't feel ready. The weak self hates those moments. It will resist. It will remind you of your past. It will tell you this intensity won't last. And it's right about one thing. Motivation won't last. But discipline doesn't need to. Discipline is built one decision at a time. One promise kept. One excuse ignored. One moment where you choose effort instead of escape. And every time you do that, the weak self loses power. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But steadily. Until one day you realize something has changed. You no longer negotiate with yourself. You no longer wait to feel like it. You no longer need external validation to move forward. You act because that's who you are now. That's how the weak version of you ends. Not through anger. Not through punishment. But through growth. You don't destroy it. You outgrow it. And when that happens, what remains is someone stronger. Someone calmer. Someone who doesn't collapse under pressure or hide from responsibility. Someone unstoppable. This is your wake-up call. And it begins now. Your weak self has a voice. Not a loud one. Not an obvious one. It doesn't shout or threaten you. It doesn't sound evil or destructive. That's why it's so dangerous. It sounds reasonable. It sounds familiar. It sounds like comfort wrapped in logic. It speaks to you in moments when you're tired, when you're alone, when no one is watching. It doesn't rush you. It waits patiently. Like it knows you'll come back to it eventually. And when it speaks, it knows exactly what to say. You can start tomorrow. You've been through a lot. You deserve rest. Just this once won't matter. Every sentence feels gentle. Almost caring. Like it's on your side. And every time you listen, it wins. At first, you don't even notice what's happening. One delay doesn't feel like failure. One excuse doesn't feel like quitting. One missed day feels harmless. But the weak self doesn't work in big, dramatic moments. It works quietly. It survives on small permissions you give it. Tiny compromises. Little deals you make with yourself. You tell yourself you'll get serious soon. You tell yourself you just need the right time. You tell yourself you're different. You'll make up for it later. But later keeps moving. Your weak self isn't lazy. That's the lie most people believe, and it keeps them stuck. Laziness sounds simple. Laziness sounds like a character flaw you can fix with motivation. But this isn't laziness. It's fear. Fear dressed up as logic. Your weak self is scared of discomfort. Not pain, discomfort. The kind that comes from doing something unfamiliar. From pushing when it would be easier to stop. From choosing effort when comfort is right there, within reach. It's scared of failure. Because failure would mean proof. Proof that you tried and didn't get the result you wanted. Proof that the fantasy version of yourself might not match reality. As long as you don't fully commit, you never have to face that possibility. It's scared of effort. Not because effort is impossible, but because effort exposes intention. When you truly try, you can't hide behind, "I didn't really give it my all." You either grow, or you confront where you stand. And most of all, it's scared of accountability. Because accountability means owning your potential. It means accepting that if you don't become who you know you could be, the responsibility is yours. Not your past. Not other people. Not circumstances. That's a heavy weight. So your weak self hides. It hides behind excuses that sound logical. It hides behind emotions that feel justified. It hides behind the past, replaying old wounds as reasons to stay small. I would have been further by now if things were different. You don't know what I've been through. Other people had it easier. Some of those things may be true. Life isn't fair. People carry real pain, real loss, real trauma. But the weak self uses truth selectively. It takes real experiences and turns them into permanent limitations. It convinces you that healing means avoiding effort. That rest means stopping completely. That self-compassion means never demanding more from yourself. And slowly, almost invisibly, your world shrinks. You stop aiming as high. You stop expecting as much. You stop believing the version of yourself you once imagined is still possible. Not because it isn't, but because believing would require action. There's a moment most people remember even if they don't talk about it. A moment when they felt something inside them pull back. When ambition softened. When hunger dulled. When they chose safety over growth for the first time. Maybe it happened after a failure. Maybe after rejection. Maybe after being judged or misunderstood. At the time it felt like self-protection. And maybe it was. But protection has a cost. When you protect yourself from pain too much, you also protect yourself from progress. Your weak self learned something in those moments. It learned that staying small feels safer. That expectations hurt. That trying opens you up to disappointment. So it made a promise to you. I'll keep you comfortable. I'll keep you safe. I'll make sure you don't feel that way again. And you agreed without realizing what you were giving up. Now, every time you stand at the edge of something meaningful, that voice shows up. Calm, persuasive, familiar. You don't need to push today. Other people aren't doing more than you. You're already doing enough. It never tells you to quit forever. That would alarm you. It just asks you to wait, to pause, to delay, to soften your standards a little more. That's how it survives. And as long as it stays alive, your future stays small. Not empty. Not ruined. Just smaller than it could have been. You still function. You still get by. You still have moments of happiness. That's what makes it dangerous. You don't feel broken enough to change. You don't hurt enough to fight back. You exist in a middle place. Comfortable enough to stay. Unfulfilled enough to feel something is missing. Late at night, when things are quiet, that feeling surfaces. A subtle restlessness. A thought you try not to linger on. I could be more than this. And immediately your weak self responds. Don't be so hard on yourself. You're fine. Not everyone is meant for more. That last one is its favorite. Because if you believe that, the struggle ends. The effort stops. The responsibility disappears. But deep down you know the truth. You know there's a stronger version of you that shows up when it matters. You felt it in brief moments, when you pushed past fear, when you acted despite doubt, when you surprised yourself with discipline or courage. Those moments weren't accidents. They were glimpses. Your strong self exists. But it doesn't speak softly. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't comfort. It doesn't explain. It waits. And every time you choose comfort over growth, it gets quieter. This isn't about hating your weak self. Hatred doesn't work. It just creates another excuse. This is about seeing it clearly, naming it, understanding its patterns. Once you recognize its voice, it loses some of its power. You start noticing how often it shows up right before progress, right before consistency, right before commitment. You see how it uses the same phrases, the same emotional hooks. And then comes the hardest part. You stop negotiating with it. You don't argue. You don't explain. You don't promise to make it up later. You act anyway. That action doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be honest. One step taken without permission from comfort. One choice made without waiting to feel ready. Your weak self will resist at first. It will get louder, more emotional. It might even make you feel guilty for changing. That's normal. That's what happens when a pattern starts to break. But something else happens too. Your strong self wakes up. Not all at once. Not heroically. Just quietly, steadily. It starts trusting you again. It starts believing you'll follow through. And as that trust grows, the voice of weakness fades. Not completely, but enough. Because fear never fully disappears. Discomfort never stops existing. But they stop being in control. And that's the shift. You don't become fearless. You become accountable. You don't eliminate weakness. You outgrow it. Your future expands the moment you stop protecting your limitations and start respecting your potential. And it starts with one honest realization. The voice holding you back isn't who you are. It's just the part of you that's afraid to find out who you could become. You don't lack motivation. If motivation were the problem, you wouldn't feel this way. You wouldn't feel that tight knot in your chest when you scroll past reminders of what you promised yourself. You wouldn't feel guilt when the day ends and you realize, once again, you didn't do the thing you said you would. You wouldn't feel frustration or that quiet anger you turn inward, whispering things to yourself you'd never say out loud to anyone else. People who truly lack motivation don't care. You care. That's the difference. You care enough to feel disappointed. You care enough to feel restless. You care enough to replay the same conversations with yourself at night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, why am I like this? Why do I keep doing this to myself? The problem isn't motivation. The real problem is that you negotiate with weakness. It happens so quietly you barely notice it. There's no dramatic moment where you consciously decide to give up. No loud declaration. No clear line where you cross from discipline into failure. It starts as a conversation in your own head. A reasonable one. A gentle one. One that sounds like self-care. I'll do it later. I've had a long day. I'll go easy today. I'll make up for it tomorrow. And in that moment it feels harmless. You're not quitting forever, you tell yourself. You're just postponing. You're just adjusting. You're being flexible. You're being kind to yourself. But what you're really doing is making a deal with the part of you that wants comfort instead of growth. That part knows exactly what to say. It knows your stress points. It knows your excuses. It knows how to sound logical, compassionate, even wise. It never says, give up your future. It says, rest today. It never says, stay stuck. It says, you deserve a break. And because it doesn't sound like weakness, you listen. The dangerous thing about weakness is that it rarely looks weak in the moment. It looks reasonable. It looks like balance. It looks like mercy. But here's the truth most people never face. Tomorrow never comes stronger. Every time you say later, you think you're postponing effort. But what you're actually doing is postponing responsibility. And responsibility doesn't disappear. It waits. It piles up. It gets heavier. So when tomorrow arrives, you're not facing the task fresh. You're facing it with the added weight of yesterday's avoidance. That's why tomorrow feels harder. Not because you're lazy. Not because you're broken. But because you trained your brain to associate quitting with relief. Every time you stop early, your brain learns something. It learns that discomfort is optional. It learns that resistance works. It learns that if it pushes back just a little, you'll negotiate. And the brain loves efficiency. So next time it pushes back sooner. Louder. More convincingly. What used to take an hour of effort before you quit now takes 30 minutes. Then 10. Then just the thought of starting feels exhausting. That's not weakness by nature. That's weakness by repetition. Weakness is learned behavior. And so is strength. But strength doesn't announce itself either. It doesn't arrive as a burst of motivation or a sudden personality change. It's built in quiet moments when no one is watching, when the decision feels small but costs you comfort. Think about the times you actually followed through. The days you did what you said you would even when you didn't feel like it. You didn't suddenly feel amazing beforehand. You didn't feel inspired. You probably felt tired. Maybe irritated. Maybe doubtful. But you acted anyway. And after, something subtle happened. You didn't just complete the task. You strengthened a relationship with yourself. You trusted yourself a little more. You respected yourself a little more. That feeling doesn't come from success. It comes from alignment. From doing what you said you would do. Now think about the opposite. Every time you quit, something else happens. You don't just skip the task. You break a promise. And the brain remembers that too. It starts to question your words. It stops taking your goals seriously. It learns that your intentions don't require action. So the next time you try to start again, there's resistance, not just from laziness but from memory. Your mind says, why bother? You're not going to finish anyway. And that voice sounds like doubt. But it's really conditioning. This is why starting feels easy but continuing feels hard. Starting gives you a hit of hope. A sense of possibility. It feels good to imagine a better version of yourself. That part costs nothing. But continuing costs comfort. Continuing costs identity. Continuing forces you to confront the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. And that gap is uncomfortable. So you negotiate. You tell yourself you'll start again on Monday. Or next month. Or when things calm down. Or when you feel more ready. But readiness is a lie your comfort uses to delay growth. You don't become ready by waiting. You become ready by acting while you don't feel ready. This is the part no one likes to hear. The version of you that finishes things is not more motivated than you. It's not more disciplined by birth. It simply stopped negotiating. It decided that discomfort is not a reason to quit. That decision doesn't feel heroic. Feels boring. Repetitive. Sometimes miserable. But it rewires the brain. Every time you follow through despite resistance, your brain learns a new pattern. It learns that discomfort does not equal danger. It learns that effort does not require permission from your emotions. It learns that you can act without motivation. And slowly the resistance changes. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But steadily. What once felt unbearable becomes tolerable. What once felt heavy becomes routine. That's how strength is built. Not through massive breakthroughs, but through small, uncelebrated moments of consistency. The problem is we romanticize motivation. We wait for it like it's a prerequisite. Like discipline only works when motivation shows up first. But motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes based on mood, sleep, stress, environment. Strength doesn't rely on it. Strength is quiet. It doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It doesn't negotiate. It simply does the next right thing even when every part of you wants to stop. And yes, that part of you will still speak up. The weak part never disappears completely. It just loses authority. It will still say, not today. It will still say, you've done enough. It will still say, no one will know. The difference is you stop answering it. You don't fight it. You don't debate it. You don't try to silence it. You act anyway. And every time you do, you send a signal to your brain. I decide, not you. That signal compounds. Over time, quitting stops feeling like relief and starts feeling like loss. Not because you're harsh with yourself, but because you've experienced the cost of stopping too many times. You felt the regret, the self-disappointment, the quiet shame that follows broken promises. And you realize something important. The pain of discipline is temporary. The pain of regret lingers. So you stop choosing based on how you feel in the moment. You choose based on who you want to trust tomorrow. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about productivity. It's about identity. Every action is a vote for the kind of person you believe you are. When you quit, you vote for the version of you that escapes discomfort. When you continue, you vote for the version of you that honors commitments. Neither vote is final, but repeated votes shape the outcome. Weakness is learned behavior. So is strength. And the good news is this. If you learned how to quit, you can learn how to continue. Not by being perfect. Not by never failing again. But by refusing to negotiate with the part of you that wants comfort at the cost of your future. You don't need more motivation. You need fewer negotiations. And the moment you stop bargaining with weakness is the moment strength finally has room to grow. Let me ask you something honestly. Not rhetorically. Not dramatically. Honestly. What has your weak self cost you? Not in theory. Not in motivation quotes. In real life. Close your eyes for a second and think about it. Think about the moments you almost took action, but didn't. The days you promised yourself you would start, and the nights you went to sleep knowing you didn't. Think about how often you told yourself it wasn't the right time, that you were tired, that you deserved rest, that tomorrow would be better. What did that cost you? Maybe it was an opportunity you never went after because you didn't feel ready. You watched someone else take it instead. Someone no smarter than you. No more talented. Just more willing to act before they felt comfortable. Maybe it was time. Years that slipped by quietly while you were busy surviving instead of building. Days that blended together. Weeks that disappeared. Whole seasons of your life gone, not because of tragedy but because of delay. Or maybe it was potential. That heavy feeling you carry sometimes, the sense that there's more inside you than what your life currently shows. A quiet frustration you don't talk about. A feeling that you're living beneath your ability, beneath your strength. The weak self rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't show up screaming. It whispers. It says, just today take it easy. It says, you've been through enough. It says, you can start when things calm down. And every time you listen, it takes something from you. Not all at once. Not in a way you can easily point to. It steals quietly. Day by day. Hour by hour. Choice by choice. That's what makes it so dangerous. If the weak self demanded everything at once, you would resist. If it asked you to destroy your life in one decision, you'd say no. But it never does that. It asks for small sacrifices. Tiny compromises. Moments of comfort that seem harmless. Skip this workout. Postpone that conversation. Scroll a little longer. Sleep a little later. Quit a little earlier. Each choice feels insignificant on its own. But the cost isn't charged today. It's charged later. The weak self always promises relief now and delivers regret later. It offers you comfort in the present and takes payment from your future. At first you don't feel it. Life continues. You still function. You still laugh. You still get through the day. That's why it's easy to believe nothing is wrong. But slowly something shifts. You begin to feel heavier. Not physically at first, but emotionally. Tasks feel harder than they should. Motivation feels forced. You start needing external pressure just to do what once felt natural. You notice yourself avoiding mirrors, not just the physical kind, but the mental ones too. You stop asking yourself hard questions. You stop checking in honestly. Because deep down you already know the answers. You know what you should be doing. You know what you've been avoiding. You know where you've been lying to yourself. And that knowledge becomes exhausting. The weak self thrives on delay. It survives by convincing you that there's always more time. That urgency is unnecessary. That discipline can wait. But time doesn't wait. One day blends into the next and suddenly years have passed. You wake up older than you expected to be, more tired than you remember feeling, carrying a quiet anger you can't fully explain. You look at your life and it feels unfamiliar. Not terrible. Not dramatic. Just underwhelming. This isn't where you thought you'd be. That realization doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in. It shows up in small moments. When you see someone younger doing what you told yourself you would do someday. When you feel your body ache from neglect. When your reflection looks older than your ambition feels. You start thinking about all the versions of yourself that never made it. The paths you didn't take. The habits you never built. The courage you postponed until it expired. That's when regret enters the room. Regret isn't loud either. It's quiet. Heavy. Persistent. It sits with you when the noise fades. When the distractions stop working. When you're alone with your thoughts at night. Regret doesn't scream. It whispers, "You knew better." And that's the real pain. Not the effort you avoided. Not the discomfort you feared. But the awareness that you had chances, and you negotiated them away. The weak self always frames itself as kindness. As self-care. As patience. But real self-care doesn't leave you feeling ashamed. Real kindness doesn't erode your self-respect. There's a difference between rest and avoidance. Between compassion and surrender. The weak self blurs that line on purpose. It tells you you're being gentle with yourself when in reality you're shrinking. It convinces you that pushing yourself is dangerous when in reality stagnation is. And the longer you keep the weak self alive, the more it costs you, not just externally but internally. You lose trust in yourself. Every promise you break weakens the relationship you have with your own word. Every time you say, "I'll do it tomorrow," and don't, a small part of you stops believing you. Eventually, motivation isn't the problem. Self-trust is. You stop feeling capable not because you aren't, but because your actions no longer match your intentions. The gap between who you say you are and how you live becomes wider. And living in that gap is exhausting. You carry guilt without knowing exactly where it comes from. You feel restless even when you're resting. You feel tired even when you haven't done anything difficult. That's the cost of keeping the weak self alive. It doesn't just take opportunities. It takes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't follow through. Someone who starts and stops. Someone who talks more than they act. And once that story settles in, it becomes harder to challenge. The weak self grows stronger the longer you feed it. It becomes familiar, comfortable, predictable. It shapes your routines, your excuses, your expectations. You stop dreaming big because big dreams hurt when nothing changes. You stop setting goals because goals remind you of past failures. You start settling not because you want to, but because it feels safer. This is how people slowly disappear from their own lives. Not through collapse. Through compromise. The real danger was never pain. Pain passes. Effort ends. Discomfort fades. The real danger is regret because regret stays. Regret follows you into quiet moments. It shows up when you see photos of your younger self. When you imagine your future and feel uncertain instead of excited. When you ask yourself, "Is this really it?" And the worst part is knowing that much of it was avoidable. You didn't lack ability. You didn't lack intelligence. You didn't lack potential. You lacked the willingness to disappoint your weak self. The weak self doesn't want growth. It wants safety. It wants familiarity. It wants comfort even if comfort costs you everything else. Keeping it alive feels harmless in the moment. But over time it demands more. More excuses. More compromises. More surrender. Until one day you realize you've built a life around avoiding discomfort instead of pursuing meaning. And that realization hurts more than any workout, any hard conversation, any early morning, any disciplined choice ever could. The truth is simple even if it's uncomfortable. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're making a trade. You're trading future strength for present ease. You're trading long-term pride for short-term relief. And the bill always comes due. The weak self doesn't ruin your life all at once. It erodes it, slowly, quietly, patiently. Until you wake up one day and realize the life you're living is the result of thousands of small choices you didn't think mattered. That's the real cost. Not pain. Not effort. But regret you can't undo. And once you see that clearly, you're left with one question. How much longer are you willing to pay it? Change doesn't begin with motivation. That's the lie most people live inside for years. They wait for a feeling to arrive like a rescue boat. They wait for a burst of energy. A perfect morning. A clean week. A sign from the universe. And while they wait, life keeps moving. Days pass like pages you didn't even read. And you keep telling yourself the same sentence in different outfits, "I'll start soon." But real change rarely starts with inspiration. It starts with disgust. Not the kind you show other people. Not the kind that makes you dramatic. The quiet kind. The internal kind. The kind that creeps in when you're alone and you can't distract yourself anymore. The kind that rises when you hear your own excuses and they suddenly sound pathetic in your ears. Disgust with excuses. Disgust with delay. Disgust with betraying yourself. It's the moment you catch yourself doing the same thing again. The same pattern. The same loop. You promised you wouldn't. You swore this time would be different. And then you watch yourself repeat it anyway, like your body moved before your brain could stop it. And something inside you just snaps. Not in a violent way. In a clear way. Like a thread finally breaks after being pulled too tight for too long. You remember what it feels like. That moment when you're standing in front of your own life, looking at it like it belongs to someone else. You see the unfinished goals. The neglected health. The relationships you've let slip. The potential you keep talking about but never touching. And there's a strange heaviness in your chest because you realize something painful. You've been lying to yourself. Not with words. With behavior. Every time you say, I want to change, and then choose comfort again, it leaves a mark. It's not always obvious, but it accumulates. It builds a quiet mistrust inside you. You stop believing your own promises. You stop taking yourself seriously. And that's one of the most dangerous places a person can live, when you can't even trust you. That's where the disgust comes from. It isn't hatred. It's clarity. It's the part of you that's tired of being disappointed by you. It shows up after the third time you hit snooze and the shame follows you into the shower. It shows up after you scroll for an hour, numb, and then look at the clock like it betrayed you. It shows up when you open your notes app and see the same goals written there from months ago, untouched like museum artifacts of the person you wanted to be. It shows up when you catch your reflection and you don't recognize the look in your own eyes anymore. Disgust is the emotion that says, enough. Because motivation is fragile. Motivation is weather. It changes. It comes and goes. It depends on sleep, mood, confidence, and what someone said to you yesterday. Motivation is a visitor. Disgust is different. Disgust doesn't ask you how you feel. It tells you the truth. And here's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes you need that truth to hurt. Because comfort is seductive. Comfort is convincing. Comfort doesn't scream. It whispers. It says, not today. It says, you deserve a break. It says, you can do it later. Comfort always offers a small relief now, and it hides the cost until tomorrow. But there comes a moment when comfort becomes more painful than discipline. That's the turning point. Because up until that moment, comfort has been your safe place. Your escape. Your reward. Your hiding spot. Discipline felt like punishment. Like struggle. Like pressure. Like something you should only do when you're strong enough. Then one day comfort stops feeling safe. It starts feeling like a cage. You realize the rest you keep chasing isn't even rest anymore. It's avoidance. It's numbness. It's delay dressed up as self-care. It's the same excuse repeated so many times it starts sounding like a lullaby you used to put your future to sleep. And you get tired of it. Not tired like sleepy. Tired like fed up. Tired like you've been carrying the weight of your own potential and you're done pretending it doesn't matter. This is usually when people have their moment. It's not always dramatic. It might be quiet. It might happen in a car, sitting in silence after another wasted day. It might happen in the middle of a random Tuesday when nothing special happened at all. It might happen while brushing your teeth when you look at yourself and something in your eyes says, how long are we going to do this? Sometimes it happens when you fail again. Sometimes it happens when you succeed a little and realize how much you've been holding back. Sometimes it happens when someone you love looks at you with disappointment, not angry, just tired, and it hits you harder than shouting ever could. Sometimes it happens when you're alone and you feel the loneliness you've been trying to drown with distractions. And in that moment, you don't feel motivated. You feel disgusted. Disgusted with the gap between what you say and what you do. Disgusted with how easily you negotiate with weakness. Because that's what you've been doing whether you admit it or not. You've been negotiating. You've been bargaining with the part of you that wants comfort instead of growth. You've been having little meetings in your mind where weakness always shows up with a calm voice and a reasonable argument. Just today. Just this once. You've had a long week. You'll start tomorrow. And you've been listening because the argument always feels good in the moment. It always offers relief. And your brain loves relief more than it loves results. But then comes the moment you decide to change. And it's different because you stop talking. You stop making deals. You stop promising and postponing. You stop negotiating. That's the moment you stop arguing with weakness. You don't try to convince it. You don't debate it like it's an equal voice. You don't sit there and explain why you should be disciplined today, like you're trying to win a court case in your own head. You simply recognize it. Oh, you're here. And then you move anyway. This is what most people don't understand about discipline. They think discipline is something you earn. Something you build only after you feel confident. Something you develop after you get your life together. But discipline doesn't come from emotion. It comes from decision. A decision is clean. A decision is direct. A decision doesn't require you to feel ready. A decision doesn't require perfect conditions. A decision doesn't require motivation. A decision is a line in the sand. And once you draw it, you stop stepping over it. It doesn't mean the voice of weakness disappears. It doesn't mean you suddenly become a different person overnight. That voice still shows up. It will try new angles, new excuses, new strategies. It will remind you of how tired you are, how hard it is, how you failed before, how you might fail again. But the difference is, you no longer treat that voice like a command. You treat it like background noise, because now you've seen the cost. You've seen what your weak self has taken from you. Time, confidence, opportunities, pride, health, respect, joy. You've seen how it steals quietly day by day without ever looking like a thief. And you're disgusted enough to stop letting it win. So you act. Not because you feel like it, but because you decided. You get up. You move your body. You do the hard thing. You take the uncomfortable step. You start the work. You make the call. You write the first paragraph. You drink the water. You go for the walk. You open the laptop. You stop scrolling. You say no. You say yes to yourself. Small actions, but they feel heavy at first because you're breaking an identity. You're breaking the identity of the person who always delays. And your brain hates identity change. It will resist. It will try to pull you back into the old version of you because the old version is familiar. Familiar feels safe even when it's destroying you. That's why the first days of change are always the hardest. Not because the task is impossible, but because you're fighting your own internal gravity. You're fighting years of patterns. Years of self-betrayal. Years of comfort conditioning. And in those moments, your feelings will not help you. Your feelings will beg you to stop. Your feelings will say, this is too much. Your feelings will say, you can do it later. Your feelings will say, one day off won't hurt. And if you're waiting for feelings to change first, you'll be stuck forever. So you go back to decision. You remind yourself, discipline doesn't come from emotion. It comes from decision. Decision is what you lean on when your emotions are unstable. Decision is what remains when motivation disappears. Decision is what builds trust with yourself again. Because every time you act in alignment with your decision, something powerful happens. Not loudly, quietly. You start to respect yourself. It's small at first, almost unnoticeable, but it's there. A shift in how you carry yourself. A steadiness in your voice. A little less shame in your chest. Because you did what you said you would do. And for the first time in a long time, you're not embarrassed by your own promises. You begin to rebuild the relationship with yourself. The one you've neglected. The one you've damaged with delays and excuses. You rebuild it the same way you rebuild trust with anyone. Consistency. Not perfection. Consistency. You don't need a massive transformation in one day. You need proof day after day that you mean what you say. And every time weakness shows up and you don't negotiate, you get stronger. Not in a motivational poster way. In a real way. Because you're teaching your brain a new rule. We act even when it's uncomfortable. You're teaching your nervous system that discomfort is not danger. You're teaching your identity that you are the kind of person who follows through. That's why the moment you decide to change is so important. It's not the day you become perfect. It's the day you stop lying. It's the day you stop waiting to feel ready. It's the day you stop making comfort your God. It's the day you look at your life and say, no more. No more excuses that sound good but lead nowhere. No more delay that steals your future. No more betraying yourself and calling it normal. You act. And in that action you begin to become someone else. Not someone new. Someone you were always supposed to be, before comfort convinced you to stay small. That's change. Not a feeling. A decision. And once you make it, you don't negotiate. Let's be clear about what this really means because people hear the phrase, kill the weak self, and they imagine something dramatic. A sudden transformation. A montage. A moment where you wake up one morning and you're a completely different person. That's not how it happens. Killing the weak self isn't violence. It isn't hatred. It isn't punishing yourself. It's starving it. It's taking away the daily meals you've been feeding it for years. Excuses, delays, comfort, bargaining. Just this once, and I'll start tomorrow. It's cutting off the supply line. It's choosing not to keep that old version of you alive. Because the weak self doesn't die in one big moment. It dies in 1,000 small ones. It dies when it begs and you say no. Not aggressively. Not with rage. Just calmly. Quietly. Like someone closing a door and locking it, even while they hear knocking from the other side. The weak self always knows what to say. It doesn't come as a villain. It comes as a friend. It comes with logic that sounds gentle. It comes with reasons that feel reasonable. You're tired? Rest today. You've been through a lot. You deserve a break. Just do it later. You'll be better tomorrow. Skip it once. It won't matter. And that's why it wins so often. Because it doesn't ask you to ruin your life in one day. It asks you to sacrifice your future in small pieces. A little discipline traded for a little comfort. A little progress traded for a little relief. And the trade always feels harmless in the moment. Until you look back and realize how much you've given away. So when we say killing the weak self, we're really talking about starving it daily. It means saying no when it begs. It means showing up when it wants you to hide. It means doing the work even when no one is watching. That last part matters more than people realize. Because it's easy to perform when eyes are on you. It's easy to work hard when praise is coming. It's easy to stay disciplined when someone is tracking your progress. But the weak self doesn't live in public. It lives in private. It lives in the moments where no one can see you choose. No one can judge you. No one can clap for you. It lives in the kitchen late at night. In the bed when the alarm goes off. In the quiet hour when you could work, or scroll, or disappear. That's where the real battle happens. And it's not loud. It's subtle. It's internal. It's you sitting there, feeling that pull, that heaviness, that familiar urge to delay your life again. You don't need dramatic changes. You need daily execution. That's the difference between fantasy and transformation. Fantasy says, one day I'll become disciplined. Execution says, today I'll do what I said I would do, even if I don't feel like it. And yes, it's boring sometimes. It's repetitive. It's not glamorous. It doesn't make a good highlight reel. But it works. Because discipline doesn't show up as motivation. It shows up as behavior. As action. As proof. Wake up when it's hard. Not because you feel heroic. Not because you're excited. But because you made a decision and you're tired of negotiating with yourself. You know that moment. The alarm goes off and your eyes barely open and your mind starts talking immediately. Just 5 more minutes. You didn't sleep enough. Today can be a rest day. You'll still be productive later. And it feels warm. Safe. Like being pulled back into comfort. That's the weak self begging. If you obey it, you don't just lose the morning. You feed it again. You remind it, if you complain, I'll listen. But when you sit up anyway, slowly, painfully, without drama, you do something powerful. You teach your mind a new rule. You teach it that your word means something. Train when it's uncomfortable. Not when you feel strong. Not when you feel confident. Not when your energy is perfect. Train when it's uncomfortable because discomfort is the price of becoming someone you respect. You're going to feel resistance. That's normal. The weak self will try to protect you from anything that challenges you. It will label discomfort as danger. It will exaggerate how hard it will be. It will try to convince you that avoiding pain is wisdom. But it's not wisdom. It's avoidance wearing a smarter outfit. When you train while it's uncomfortable, you aren't just building a body. You're building an identity. You're proving to yourself, in a language your brain cannot ignore, that you are the kind of person who shows up. Focus when distractions call. This one is brutal because distractions aren't just random. They're designed. They're everywhere. They offer immediate relief and instant stimulation. They give you the feeling of movement without the pain of progress. And the weak self loves them. Because distractions let you escape responsibility while still feeling busy. They let you delay your goals without admitting you're avoiding them. They let you stay comfortable and call it a break. But focus is a form of discipline too. It's choosing to sit with boredom. To sit with struggle. To sit with the uncomfortable silence where growth actually happens. It's closing the extra tabs. Putting the phone face down. Telling yourself, not now. And in the beginning it will feel like you're wrestling your own brain. Because you are. Finish what you start. This is where most people break. Not because they can't start, but because they can't finish. Starting feels hopeful. Finishing feels demanding. Starting gives you excitement. Finishing requires endurance. The weak self loves unfinished things. Because unfinished means you still get to call yourself someone who's trying, without ever having to face the pressure of actually becoming. Finishing is responsibility. Finishing is proof. Finishing is the moment you can't hide behind potential anymore. So when you finish what you start, when you complete the workout, send the email, write the page, clean the mess, keep the commitment, you do something deeper than completing a task. You close the gap between who you say you are and what you actually do. And that gap is where self-respect lives or dies. Every small act of discipline weakens the old version of you. Let that sink in. Not one giant heroic day. Not a perfect week. Not a sudden personality change. Small acts. The moment you don't hit snooze. The moment you get up and drink water instead of reaching for dopamine. The moment you do 10 minutes of work when you wanted to quit. The moment you say no to what ruins you even when your body wants it. Those moments are quiet, but they are lethal to your old self. Because the old version of you survives on patterns. On predictability. On the same excuses repeated until they feel like truth. When you break a pattern once, you create a crack. When you break it twice, you create a gap. When you break it daily, you create a new life. Every kept promise strengthens the new one. This is the part people underestimate. Promises to others are easy to respect sometimes because there are consequences. There's reputation. There's guilt. There's social pressure. But promises to yourself? Those are the ones you break first. Those are the ones you negotiate. Those are the ones you treat like suggestions. And every time you break one, something inside you learns a painful lesson. My word doesn't mean much. That's why confidence disappears. That's why motivation feels fake. That's why you don't trust yourself. Because trust is built the same way it's built with anyone else, through consistency. So you rebuild it the only way it can be rebuilt. You start making small promises and you keep them. Not huge ones. Not, I'll change my whole life overnight. Small ones. I'll wake up at this time. I'll train for 20 minutes. I'll work for 1 hour with my phone off. I'll finish this task today. And you do it. Even if it's messy. Even if it's imperfect. Even if your mood is wrong. Because discipline is not a feeling. It's a decision you honor. Some days you'll do it with fire in your chest. Other days you'll do it with emptiness. Some days you'll do it while doubting yourself the entire time. But you'll do it anyway. And slowly the weak self starts starving. It starts losing its grip. Its voice gets quieter. Its arguments get weaker. Not because it stops talking, but because you stop obeying. You begin to recognize the difference between the voice that wants comfort and the voice that wants respect. One voice wants you to feel good right now. The other voice wants you to be proud later. And at first, choosing the second voice feels like sacrifice. But then something changes. You start waking up with less shame. You start walking with a little more presence. You start looking at yourself and thinking, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm no longer lying to myself. That's the beginning of a new identity. Not the identity you post online. Not the identity you pretend to be. The identity you can feel in your bones because you earned it. And that's what killing the weak self really means. It's not a dramatic event. It's daily execution. It's starving the version of you that keeps you small. And feeding the version of you that finally keeps your promises. This journey isn't comfortable. And it was never meant to be. Somewhere along the way, many people were sold a quiet lie, that growth should feel good, that progress should feel motivating, that if something is right for you, it won't hurt. That if you're meant for it, it will feel natural and smooth. That lie has stopped more people than failure ever could. Because the truth is simpler and harder to accept. You will feel resistance. You will feel tired. You will feel doubt. Not once. Not occasionally. But again and again. And when those feelings arrive, your mind will immediately search for meaning. It will ask, why does this feel so hard? Why am I struggling? Maybe this isn't for me. That's where most people turn back. Not because they can't continue, but because they misunderstand the pain. Resistance feels personal at first. It feels like something inside you pushing back, like an invisible wall you keep running into. You sit down to work and suddenly everything else feels urgent. Your body feels heavy. Your mind starts offering excuses that sound reasonable. You tell yourself you're tired. You tell yourself you'll do it later. You tell yourself you need more clarity, more motivation, more time. But underneath all of that is something simpler. It's the weak self fighting for survival. That part of you isn't evil. It's not lazy. It's not stupid. It was built to protect you, from discomfort, from uncertainty, from effort that doesn't offer immediate reward. For years, maybe decades, it has kept you safe by keeping you still. So when you decide to change, it panics. It doesn't scream. It negotiates. It whispers, you've already done enough today. It says, you can rest now, you deserve it. It reminds you of past failures. It questions whether this is worth the pain. And when the discomfort shows up, When your chest feels tight, when your energy dips, when doubt creeps in, that voice points to the pain and says, "See, this is wrong. Stop." But that pain isn't punishment. Pain is proof of growth. Pain means you're asking more of yourself than you did before. Pain means you've stepped outside familiar patterns. Pain means something old is being challenged. Nothing resists being replaced more than an identity. The moment you try to become stronger, more disciplined, more focused, the old version of you feels threatened. And it uses discomfort as its last line of defense. That's why this part is so important. Because the strongest people aren't fearless. They feel the same resistance you do. The same doubts. The same fatigue. The same voice telling them to quit. The difference is not what they feel, it's what they obey. Fear says, "Stop." Doubt says, "Wait." Discomfort says, "Go back." They hear it all. They just don't follow it. They understand something most people never learn. Discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're moving. The first time you push past it, it feels unnatural. Almost wrong. Your body feels tense. Your mind keeps checking for escape routes. Every step forward feels heavier than it should. But if you stay with it, if you don't run, don't distract yourself, don't numb it, something shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes quieter, more familiar, less threatening. And then, slowly, momentum begins. Momentum doesn't arrive as a rush of motivation. It arrives as relief. The relief of realizing you didn't break. The relief of seeing that discomfort didn't kill you. The relief of knowing you can move forward even when it's hard. That relief is addictive. The next time resistance shows up, it still hurts, but less. You recognize it. You don't panic. You don't start bargaining with yourself. You say, "This again?" and you move anyway. That's how momentum is built. One uncomfortable step at a time. Momentum turns effort into identity. At first, you're forcing yourself. You're pushing. You're choosing discipline over desire. Every action feels deliberate, heavy, intentional. But repetition does something powerful. What once required willpower begins to feel normal. What once felt painful becomes expected. You stop asking yourself whether you feel like continuing. You simply continue. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you are now. This is the moment most people never reach. The moment when action stops being a debate and starts being a reflex. When you don't need to convince yourself anymore. When resistance shows up and you don't even argue with it. You just move. That's when people start calling you strong. They don't see the nights you doubted yourself. They don't feel the exhaustion you worked through. They don't hear the inner negotiations you stopped entertaining. They only see consistency. But consistency was built on pain. Quiet pain. Uncelebrated pain. Pain you didn't post about. Pain you didn't dramatize. You endured it long enough for it to change you. And here's the part that matters most. Once you learn that you can move forward despite discomfort, something fundamental changes in you. Fear loses its authority. Pain loses its meaning as a stop sign. Difficulty stops feeling like a verdict on your ability. It becomes feedback. You stop asking, "Why is this so hard?" and start thinking, "This is hard because it matters." That shift makes you dangerous, in the best possible way. Because now, when things get uncomfortable, you don't retreat. You lean in. You don't search for escape, you search for rhythm. You understand that pain is temporary, but quitting builds a permanent identity. And you've already lived that identity. You know what it feels like to stop, to delay, to promise yourself tomorrow, to feel the quiet disappointment at night when you know you didn't show up again. You know that pain too. And you've realized something important. That pain costs more. The pain of effort sharpens you. The pain of regret dulls you. The pain of discipline builds you. The pain of avoidance erodes you. So you choose your pain. Not because you enjoy it, but because you respect what it gives you. Momentum doesn't make life easy. It makes it honest. You stop lying to yourself about what you're capable of. You stop pretending you need perfect conditions. You stop waiting for confidence to arrive before action. Confidence comes after movement. Clarity comes after effort. Strength comes after resistance. And once momentum takes hold, stopping feels stranger than continuing. You still get tired. You still doubt. You still feel resistance. But now those feelings no longer control you. They're just weather. They pass through, but they don't change your direction. That's what makes you unstoppable. Not because you're immune to pain, but because pain no longer decides your behavior. You move forward anyway. And with every step, the weak self loses ground, not through force but through irrelevance. Its arguments stop working. Its warnings feel outdated. It realizes it no longer has control. You've learned something it can't undo. That you don't need comfort to continue. You don't need certainty to move. You don't need fearlessness to act. You just need to keep going when it hurts. Because that pain, the one you're feeling right now, is not a sign you're failing. It's the signal that you're becoming someone who doesn't stop. When the weak self fades, something powerful happens, and it doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic moment where you wake up transformed. No music. No applause. No announcement to the world. It happens quietly, almost invisibly, in small decisions no one else sees. In moments where you would have hesitated before. In situations where you used to wait, overthink, or look for permission. One day you just notice something feels different. You don't need motivation anymore. Not because life suddenly feels easy, but because you've stopped negotiating with yourself. You no longer sit around waiting to feel ready, inspired, or confident enough to act. You understand something most people never learn. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. It's emotional. It's tied to mood, energy, weather, praise, and comfort. And you've outgrown building your life on something that unstable. Instead, you move because you decided to move. Even on days when you feel tired. Even when doubt whispers in your ear. Even when no one is watching. Especially then. The weak self always asked, "Do I feel like it?" The stronger version of you asks, "What needs to be done?" And that single shift changes everything. You stop waiting for permission. You don't wait for approval. You don't wait for reassurance. You don't wait for someone to validate your plan before you take the first step. Before you might have checked with others. Asked opinions. Looked for signs. Searched for certainty outside yourself. Not because you were incapable, but because you didn't fully trust your own judgment yet. When weakness dies, that dependency fades. You still listen. You still consider. But you no longer outsource your decisions. You understand that clarity doesn't come before action. It comes from action. So you move. And because you move, you learn. And because you learn, your confidence becomes real, not imagined. You stop explaining yourself. This is one of the clearest signs that the weak self is losing its grip. You no longer feel the urge to justify your choices to people who don't live your life. You don't over-explain your boundaries. You don't build long arguments to defend decisions that already feel right to you. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're grounded. You've learned that explanations don't always bring understanding. Sometimes they just invite debate. And you've stopped needing everyone to agree with you in order to move forward. You say less. But what you say carries more weight. You move with clarity. Clarity doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you're no longer confused about your direction. Before, you might have felt scattered. Pulled in different directions. Torn between what you wanted and what felt safe. Between growth and comfort. Between who you were and who you knew you could be. That inner conflict drains energy. When the weak self fades, that noise quiets. You know what matters. You know what doesn't. And you don't waste time pretending otherwise. Your decisions become cleaner. Simpler. More direct. You stop overthinking every step because you trust yourself to adjust if needed. You stop obsessing over perfect outcomes and focus on consistent movement. That clarity shows in how you walk into a room. In how you sit. In how you listen. In how you choose your words. You speak with certainty. Not loud certainty. Not aggressive certainty. Quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't rush. The kind that doesn't argue unnecessarily. The kind that doesn't crumble when challenged. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're expressing what you know. Before, you might have softened your voice at the end of sentences. Added extra words. Laughed things off. Left space for doubt even when you were sure. Now you speak plainly. You don't oversell. You don't overpromise. You don't perform confidence. You embody it. And people feel that. They might not be able to explain it, but something about you registers as solid. Present. Unshakable. You act with intention. Your actions stop being reactions. You don't let moods decide your behavior. You don't let fear dictate your schedule. You don't let discomfort derail your commitments. You choose your actions in advance and then you follow through. This is where discipline lives. Discipline isn't punishment. It isn't restriction. It isn't suffering for the sake of suffering. Discipline is alignment between your values and your behavior. When weakness dies, discipline stops feeling forced. It becomes identity. You don't wake up asking if you'll show up today. You already know the answer. And because of that, something subtle but powerful happens around you. People feel it. They might not say anything. They might not even consciously notice it. But their behavior shifts. They listen more closely when you speak. They take your boundaries seriously. They hesitate before wasting your time. They sense that you mean what you say. Respect grows quietly. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it through consistency. Discipline is visible. You can't fake it for long. It shows in how you manage your time, in how you respond under pressure, in how you treat small responsibilities, in how you carry yourself when things don't go your way. People trust what they can observe. And discipline is observable. You don't talk endlessly about what you're going to do. You do it repeatedly, without drama. That's why people start to trust you, with opportunities, with leadership, with responsibility. And that trust feeds confidence. But not the fragile kind. Confidence grows from action, not affirmations. You've probably tried affirmations before. Saying the words, repeating them in the mirror, telling yourself you're confident, capable, strong. And maybe it helped, for a moment. But deep down you felt the gap. Because confidence that isn't backed by action feels hollow. It collapses the moment it's tested. Real confidence is built the hard way. By doing what you said you would do when it was inconvenient. By keeping promises to yourself when no one else would know if you broke them. By showing up on days you wanted to disappear. By facing discomfort instead of escaping it. Each action deposits evidence into your identity. And over time, that evidence becomes unshakable. You don't need to hype yourself up anymore. You've seen what you're capable of. When weakness dies, you don't become perfect. You still feel fear. You still have doubts. You still have moments of hesitation. But fear no longer controls your decisions. Doubt no longer paralyzes you. You act anyway. And that's the difference. You become someone who moves forward despite discomfort, not someone who waits for it to disappear. You stop romanticizing potential and start respecting execution. You understand that who you are is shaped far more by what you do repeatedly than by what you believe about yourself. And slowly, without needing to announce it, you become someone else. Someone calmer. Someone steadier. Someone harder to shake. The weak self didn't die loudly. It faded. It lost influence every time you chose discipline over comfort. Every time you acted without permission. Every time you stayed consistent instead of emotional. And what replaced it wasn't arrogance or coldness. It was presence. A grounded sense of self that doesn't need to perform, prove, or explain. You don't chase confidence anymore. You live in a way that makes confidence inevitable. And that's who you become when weakness dies. This is the hardest truth. The one that hits you in the chest before it ever reaches your mind. No one is coming. Not in the way you secretly hoped. Not like a movie scene where everything suddenly makes sense and the right person shows up at the right time and your life clicks into place. No perfect moment is waiting around the corner. No miracle is scheduled. No external push is guaranteed. The world doesn't pause and look over at you and say, okay, now you're ready. Now it's your turn. And I know how that sounds at first. Cold. Heavy. Almost unfair. Because there's a part of you, maybe a quiet part you don't even admit out loud, that keeps waiting for something to make it easier. For the fear to disappear. For motivation to arrive. For confidence to finally show up like a gift. For someone to notice how hard you've been trying, how tired you've been, how long you've been carrying this invisible weight and say, I got you. I'll handle it. But that moment doesn't come the way you think it will. And the reason this truth hurts is because waiting feels safer than acting. Waiting lets you believe you're still in the story, still on the path, still almost there. Waiting gives you a soft excuse. A temporary shelter. It keeps you from facing the terrifying idea that maybe, just maybe, your life won't change unless you are the one who forces it to. Most people live their whole lives in that waiting room. They don't call it that, but it is. They wait for Monday. They wait for New Year's. They wait until the kids are older. They wait until they have more money. They wait until they feel ready. They wait until they feel less anxious, less broken, less behind. They wait until the timing is perfect. And while they're waiting, years slip through their fingers like water. Not in dramatic, obvious ways. Quiet ways. Small ways. A week here. A month there. A dream slowly getting dusty in the corner of their mind. A promise they stopped making because it hurt too much to keep breaking it. You don't realize how far you've drifted until one day you're standing in the middle of your life and it doesn't look like what you imagined. And that moment, when it finally hits, isn't loud. It's quiet. It's you sitting alone, maybe at night, maybe early in the morning before everyone wakes up. You're staring at the ceiling or the wall or your phone screen, scrolling without even reading, and you feel this ache you can't explain. Like something inside you is tired of being ignored. You tell yourself you're fine. You tell yourself you're busy. You tell yourself you'll handle it later. But deep down you know what's happening. You're waiting. And the worst part about waiting is that it disguises itself as hope. It feels like you're being patient. It feels like you're trusting the process. But sometimes it's not hope at all. Sometimes it's fear. Fear of failing. Fear of trying and proving to yourself that maybe you can't. Fear of stepping forward and being seen. Fear of taking responsibility, because responsibility means you don't get to blame the timing anymore. So you look for signs. You look for something outside of you to change first. You think, when I finally feel motivated, I'll start. When I feel confident, I'll speak up. When someone supports me, I'll commit. When life calms down, I'll focus. And I'm not judging you for that. I get it. It's human. It's normal to want to push, to want a hand, to want someone to tell you, now, go. You're ready. But here's the truth you don't want to hear. No one is coming. Not because you don't deserve help. Not because you're not worthy. But because life doesn't work that way. Most people are too busy fighting their own battles to carry yours. Even the people who love you might not understand what you need. Even the people who mean well might not show up the way you hoped they would. And if you build your future on someone else's timing, you'll always be powerless. That's what waiting does. It gives your power away. It hands the key to your life to things you can't control. Other people's choices, the economy, your mood, your circumstances, the perfect moment that may never arrive. And that's why this truth, as painful as it is also the most freeing thing you will ever accept. Because if your life changes, it will be because you changed it. Read that again slowly. If your life changes, it will be because you changed it. Not because you got lucky. Not because someone rescued you. Not because the universe finally decided you suffered enough. Because you decided. And at first, that can feel terrifying. Because now there's nowhere to hide. No one to wait on. No fantasy to lean on. It's you. It's your choices. It's your discipline. It's your courage. It's your consistency. That's a heavy mirror to stand in front of. But listen, this isn't scary. Not when you really understand it. It's empowering. Because it means the key has always been in your hands. The door was never locked from the outside. You've been holding the key this whole time, even when you didn't realize it. Even when you felt stuck. Even when you felt like life was happening to you instead of for you. Even when you felt like you were waiting for permission to become who you know you could be. That permission isn't coming. You give it to yourself. And this is where something shifts. Because once you accept that no one is coming, you stop looking outward for answers and start looking inward for decisions. You stop asking, when will it get easier? And you start asking, what can I do today? Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Even if it's small. Especially if it's small. Because big change doesn't start with a huge dramatic moment. It starts with a quiet refusal. A line drawn inside your own mind. It starts when you wake up and you don't negotiate with the part of you that wants comfort more than it wants growth. It starts when you take that first step without certainty. Without motivation. Without the perfect plan. It starts when you do the thing while still feeling fear. That's the part no one tells you. Motivation often comes after movement, not before it. You don't wait to feel ready. You move and readiness catches up. You don't wait to feel confident. You act and confidence grows. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You build the moment by showing up anyway. And when you begin living like that, you'll feel the difference quickly. Not because life becomes easy, but because you stop feeling helpless. Helplessness is what destroys people. Not pain. Not struggle. Not hard work. Helplessness. That feeling that nothing you do matters. That you're at the mercy of circumstances. That you're trapped. That you're behind and there's no way to catch up. But the moment you decide, no one is coming so I will, helplessness starts to die. Slowly at first. Then all at once. You start making choices that used to feel impossible. You start saying no without explaining. You start cutting off distractions that were quietly draining you. You start doing the boring things that build real results. You stop craving quick fixes because you finally respect the slow process. And you'll notice something else. Some people won't like the new you. Not because you became arrogant, but because you became unavailable to manipulation. When you stop waiting, you stop being easy to control. When you stop waiting, you stop accepting half-effort love. Half-truth friendships. Half-respect workplaces. Half-hearted goals. When you stop waiting, you become direct. Clear. Intimidating to people who benefited from your uncertainty. And that's okay. Because you didn't come here to be liked by people who only love you when you're small. You came here to win your own life back. But let's be honest, there will be moments when the old habit tries to pull you back. There will be days when you feel tired and you think, what's the point? There will be days when you don't see results fast enough. There will be days when you slip, when you fall back into comfort, when you waste time, when you disappoint yourself. And in those moments, the waiting room will call your name again. It will whisper, see? You tried. It didn't work. Just wait. Just pause. Just postpone. That voice is familiar. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like protection. But it's the same voice that kept you stuck. So when it shows up, you don't fight it with emotions. You fight it with truth. You tell yourself, I don't need to feel perfect to move. I don't need to feel ready. I don't need a miracle. I just need to take the next step. Because the next step is how you break the spell. Not giant leaps. Not unrealistic transformations overnight. The next step. A workout even if it's short. A page written even if it's messy. A hard conversation even if your voice shakes. A job application even if you feel underqualified. A boundary even if it makes someone mad. This is how you stop waiting. And the moment you stop waiting, you start winning. Not winning in some loud ego-driven way. Not winning like you're better than anyone else. You start winning because you finally stop losing time. You stop losing your own respect. You stop losing opportunities to fear. You stop losing your future to comfort. Winning starts the moment you take ownership. Because ownership is power. When you own your choices, you own your results. When you own your habits, you own your direction. When you own your mistakes, you stop repeating them. And when you own your life, you stop begging the world to change for you. You change for you. That's the shift most people never make. They keep waiting for life to move first. They keep waiting for the world to understand them. They keep waiting for someone to see their potential and unlock it for them. But the truth is, your life is not waiting for you to feel ready. It's moving. Every day is passing. Every hour is disappearing. And you don't get them back. So this is the moment. Not some future moment. Not some cleaner, easier day. This moment. You can keep waiting, or you can decide. And I'm telling you now as clearly as I can, without trying to soften it, no one is coming. But that doesn't mean you're alone. It means you're in control. It means the key has always been in your hands. It means the door has always been there. And the only thing left is this. Are you going to keep standing outside, staring at it, hoping someone opens it for you? Or are you finally going to use the key you've been holding the whole time? Because the moment you stop waiting, you start winning. So here's the choice. It doesn't arrive with thunder. There's no dramatic music in the background. No one gathers around to watch it happen. This choice shows up quietly, in the middle of an ordinary moment, when no one else is paying attention. It shows up when you're tired. When you're alone. When it would be easier to delay, excuse, or distract yourself one more time. You can keep the weak version of yourself alive, or you can end it today. That weak version isn't evil. It was never trying to ruin you. It was trying to protect you the only way it knew how. It wanted comfort, safety, familiarity. It learned over time that avoiding discomfort kept the pain away. So it spoke softly, reasonably. It said things that made sense in the moment. You've had a long day. You can start tomorrow. One break won't hurt. You deserve rest before you push again. And for a long time you listened. Not because you were lazy, but because you were human. Because you were tired of struggling. Because discipline felt heavy and excuses felt light. The weak self didn't demand much. Just small compromises. Small delays. Small promises pushed into the future. But those small compromises added up. Days turned into months. Months into years. And somewhere along the way, you started to feel a quiet frustration you couldn't explain. A sense that you were capable of more but stuck in place. You looked at other people and wondered how they stayed consistent, how they kept moving forward when you kept starting over. You blamed motivation, circumstances, timing, luck. But deep down you knew the truth. The weak self was still in charge. Ending it doesn't mean hating yourself. It doesn't mean declaring war on who you've been. That only creates more resistance, more shame, more inner conflict. And shame has never made anyone stronger. It only keeps them stuck. This isn't about anger. It's about discipline. Discipline is quiet. It doesn't yell. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't need to prove anything. Discipline simply does what needs to be done whether you feel like it or not. Especially when you don't feel like it. That's where the real shift begins. Every day you choose effort over excuses, the weak self loses ground. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just a little. Like erosion. Like a shadow shrinking as the light slowly moves across the room. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your body resists. Your mind protests. You feel tension when you force yourself to do the thing you've been avoiding. Get up earlier. Start the work. Finish what you promised. Say no when it would be easier to say yes. Say yes when fear tells you to hide. The weak self fights back in those moments. It gets louder. More convincing. It reminds you of how tired you are. How hard things have been. How unfair it feels to push when others seem to glide. And this is where most people quit. Not because they can't handle pain, but because they mistake resistance for a sign they're doing something wrong. But resistance is not a warning. It's proof. Proof that the weak self is being challenged. Proof that something old is losing control. Proof that you're stepping out of patterns that once felt safe. Discipline doesn't remove that resistance. You walk straight through it. Some days you'll win cleanly. You'll do what you said you would. You'll feel proud, grounded, calm. Other days it will feel messy. You'll hesitate. You'll doubt. You might even stumble. But even then, something changes when you return to discipline instead of surrendering completely. You stop spiraling. Instead of saying, "I failed, so what's the point?" you say, "I slipped, but I'm still here." That alone weakens the old pattern. Because the weak self thrives on all or nothing thinking. It wants you to quit entirely if you can't be perfect. Discipline doesn't need perfection. It needs consistency. Over time, you notice subtle changes. You don't react as quickly. You pause before excuses form. You feel the urge to quit, and you don't obey it automatically. That pause grows longer. Longer enough to choose differently. You start trusting yourself again. That trust didn't disappear because you lacked ability. It disappeared because you broke promises to yourself too many times. Discipline rebuilds that trust slowly, brick by brick. Every time you do what you said you would, even when it's small, you restore a piece of it. And with trust comes calm. You're no longer negotiating with yourself all day. No longer stuck in mental tug-of-war. Decisions become cleaner, simpler. You don't waste energy arguing with your own mind. You decide, then act. The weak self doesn't vanish in one heroic moment. It fades. Quietly. Without ceremony. Without noise. Without drama. One day you'll notice something strange. The thing that used to feel impossible now feels normal. The discipline that once felt heavy now feels natural. The resistance still appears, but it doesn't scare you anymore. You recognize it for what it is, a habit losing power. You don't announce this moment to anyone. You don't even fully celebrate it. You just realize in the middle of an ordinary day that the voice that used to talk you out of effort is quieter now. Less convincing. Easier to ignore. It's gone. Replaced by someone stronger. Not louder. Not aggressive. Just steady. Someone calmer. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped panicking when it got hard. You learned how to sit inside discomfort without needing to escape it. You learned that you could survive resistance. That you didn't need permission to act. That you didn't need motivation to move. Someone unstoppable. Not in a dramatic, reckless way, but in a grounded way. The kind of unstoppable that doesn't rush or force outcomes. The kind that keeps showing up, day after day regardless of mood. The kind that doesn't collapse under pressure because it was built under pressure. This is what most people never see from the outside. They see the confidence, the clarity, the results. They don't see the quiet mornings when you didn't feel ready. The nights when discipline meant saying no to comfort. The moments when you chose long-term strength over short-term relief. But you remember. And that memory becomes part of who you are. This is your moment. Not because everything is perfectly aligned. Not because you finally feel fearless. But because you're aware. Because you see the pattern clearly now. Because you understand that no one is coming to rescue you from your own hesitation. And you don't need them to. The decision doesn't require a grand promise. It doesn't need a countdown or a declaration. It only needs action. Small. Immediate. Unnegotiated. Do the thing you've been delaying. Show up where you've been avoiding. Choose effort once more, even when it's inconvenient. That's how it starts. Not tomorrow. Not next week. No. And every time you repeat that choice, the weak self loses more ground. Until one day, without even realizing it, you're no longer fighting who you were. You've outgrown them. And from that point on, your life is no longer shaped by excuses. It's shaped by deliberate choice. That's the final decision. And it starts now.